He whipped her to the floor, hard. Harder than he'd meant to. She lay there for a moment, dazed. She began writhing in the pain that comes with slamming one's head against tile. The wanging in her head was so bad she began to feel a tummy ache coming on. Her wiry frame undulated like a thin scarf in the breeze, her supple tits bobbing every which way like a chameleon's eyes. He felt like a chameleon too. Like a chameleon, he too had an unusually long sticky tongue and hands designed for gripping ladies' vaginas. He also had some scaly patches around his knuckles, which he guessed were chameleon-like too. Finally, she stopped squirming around like a chameleon. Woo, he thought. He also thought maybe, if he wished hard enough, or acted in just the right way for long enough, someday he would just be a chameleon. He scooped her up in his arms and whipped her, hard, onto the daybed in the parlor. It smelled like cat pee in there, and there were some dead cats piled up in the corner. Wordlessly, he pulled her blouse and brassiere up over her head, and when they were off he saw there was blood on them. Well, really he only noticed blood on the blouse, since the blood came from the back of her head, the part that had hit the floor, and her bra strap hadn't really touched that part of her head, and even if it had, the bra was black. But the blouse was white. And there was blood on it. He flipped her over like a whore, and looked at the back of her head. It was gross back there, there was all blood and maybe some brains leaking out. He got down on top of her, and started poking around in there. It was a hole, about the thickness of his thumb. He stuck his thumb inside, and it came out looking gooey. He put in his tongue, because he'd never tasted fresh inside of a lady head. It was salty and unpleasant. He kept probing the hole with anything that would fit, batteries, pens, Lego guys. Every once in a while she'd make a spooky noise or her arm would suddenly convulse. Plugging his ears with 2 bloody AA batteries, he took a deep breath, and held it as he raised the hole to his closed right eye. He pressed the wound against his skull, until it formed a seal around his eye socket. He opened the eye, and saw her memories and dreams escaping out of her pupils, her nose, her mouth, her ear holes, any exit they could find. He pulled away. He pulled out his wiener, and looked around the room. He saw a fire extinguisher tucked into a crevice. He ran over, and grabbed it, and pulled out the safety pin. He ran the hose down into her head hole, a perfect fit. He depressed the release lever, and he heard 3 loud pops, and there was foamy powdery shit coming out of both her eyes, and one of her ears. He pulled the hose out, and her head looked like a big bowl of chowder, so then he became jealous, and sprayed the remaining solution all over himself. It itched a lot, so he took off his clothes, got in his Celica, and drove home.